Hello, everybody. Welcome into Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Jeremy Lapidus. Today, we have a lot to cover. We're going to go over winners and losers from the NBA draft that finished up yesterday. We'll talk about our winners in the first segment. I got 4 teams there, and then we'll talk about our losers. I've got 3 of them there in the second segment. Then we are going to continue our coverage of the NFL offseason and predictions for the upcoming 2024-2025 regular season, this time talking about the New York Giants officially finishing off the NFC East. We will go over the entirety of the NFC East standings, the Giants' schedule game by game, and what the Giants did this offseason to improve or get worse. Depending on how you look at it here. And then we're going to finish off our show today. It is Friday. We have our power rankings out there, so we're going to go over our weekly MLB power rankings to close out our show today. But before we get into all of that, remember that if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to GSMCPodcast.net. Leave a tip or donation with a message in it. That message should pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you do have a burning question about sports, anything at all that you would like to ask, go and throw that in the chat, throw it in the comments. I will get to it as soon as I possibly can. I appreciate all of you guys for sticking around, talking some sports with me here on a beautiful Friday afternoon. But like I was saying, we are going to get right into it here with the NBA draft. The NBA draft finished up yesterday. We covered a lot of round 2 live. Today we're going to go over winners and losers from the draft. And starting off with our NBA winners, no better place than to start off with the Lakers. The Los Angeles Lakers are my first winner for the NBA draft from last night. You talk about maybe the steal of the entire draft in round 1, getting Dalton Knecht at pick 17. Dalton Knecht, who was, one of the best, if not the best scorers in all of the NBA or in all of college basketball last season, averaging 22 on a really good Tennessee team. He is a little bit older, but he's a guy that can help, contribute to an NBA team right away. And where the Lakers are sitting, they needed to add more pieces, they needed to add more scoring, and he's not the greatest defensively. But offensively, he makes up for it, and pairing him with LeBron James, pairing him with Anthony Davis, who can help make up for some of that defensive liability there, Austin Reeves on the outside, and whoever else they have at point guard. Maybe it'll be D'Angelo Russell, we don't really know yet. But I think the Lakers really knocked it out of the park, and their second round pick, Bronny James, it's just a cool story, right? As much as he needs to develop and he won't be ready right away, being able to having LeBron James being able to play with his son is worth a 55th overall draft pick, right? This isn't an egregious pick. He gets to walk the stage. He gets to shake the commissioner's hand. He gets to go through the process, and then he gets to play on a team with his dad, right? This is the first time that has ever happened in NBA history. It's a really cool moment to see. And, whether or not he works out, I definitely don't think he'll be ready game 1. Even maybe in his first season. I know that his agent was saying that they were not going to sign any kind of 2-way deal, so he'll just eat up space on the bench. But there's plenty of guys that eat up space on the bench that never play. Your Thanasis of the league, right? And that's not to say that Bronny can't develop into something good, but I really like what this Lakers team did. Getting Dalton Knecht there at pick 17 is a huge, huge steal. So they are one of the winners here of the NBA draft. Another winner here that I have is the Minnesota Timberwolves. And the Minnesota Timberwolves had an interesting draft, right? They only really had 1 pick in this draft. They sent all their picks away to go and get Rudy Gobert from the Jazz. That was a huge trade, and probably wasn't worth all those assets they gave up, but they were able to make a trade giving up 2 future firsts to get the rights for Rob Dillingham after the Spurs drafted him at 8 overall. That pairing him in that backcourt with, Anthony Edwards being able to move the ball around. His passing is going to be huge, being able to spread the floor more. You talk about the impact that we saw a guy like Mike Connolly have on that roster when he was healthy in the playoffs, and what we saw when he was out of those games in the playoffs, especially in the Western Conference Finals. He missed a good chunk of those games, and his ability to move the rock, be a leader, Rob Dillingham can step into that, and if he is able to, develop a little bit defensively, you are losing a small step there defensively because Rob Dillingham is not at the same level as a Mike Conley, but you're getting better offensively, and the ability to have a guy like him bring the ball up, be a playmaker is something that they were really missing in Minnesota. And I think that's a huge, huge step for them as they continue to gear up for what is going to be a very, very tough Western Conference. Their other pick there at 27 and Terrence Shannon Jr., not as big of a deal. His shooting, it needs a little bit of work, but he can come in and contribute right away, right? His defense is going to be a little bit is going to be part of why they picked him here. But really the reason why I have them up here in my winners is because they were able to pull off a trade for Rob Dillingham, a type of talent that, without having any picks for the next 5 years ish, it's going to be really hard for them to get. So they get a great playmaker, a guy that can really help contribute and be a great backcourt partner for Anthony Edwards as they continue to move on forward with their championship window. Next team that I have for winners here is the Washington Wizards. And the Washington Wizards, we talk about winning drafts. The Washington Wizards are never up here. But they had 3 first-round picks, and I think they did a really good job with all of them. First of all, Alex Sarr falls to them at 2, and I'll talk a little bit about that later on, but I thought he was the best prospect in this draft. You talk about a guy who's 7 foot with a 7'4" wingspan, the ability to shoot, comes in and plays great defense right away. Pair him up with Bilal Coulibaly. It's going to be a nice young duo there in the front court, and then they get a couple of shooters there with Bub Carrington and Keyshawn George. Bub Carrington comes in, both of them shot over 40% from 3 in college, and this Wizards team isn't that close to being contenders, right? This isn't a Wizards team that they add these 3 guys to Jordan Poole, Bilal Coulibaly, Kyle Kuzma, and they're going to be playoff contenders, right? But they just put together a great draft, and if these guys develop the way that they are expected to. Alex Sarr especially is the guy that I am most excited for in this class. So I'm high on the Wizards class. Excuse me. I'm really high on the Wizards class here. And I think for the first time in a very, very long time, the Wizards did a good job drafting. That's not something that we're used to saying, right? And development is going to be a big part of any of this because there's not too many guys in this draft that are slam dunks right away, right? But, there is the possibility you have to project here. This is a big upside draft, right? And as long as these teams develop them the way that we see in the Wizards, might not have the greatest track record of developing players, but new regime, new coach, new GM come in recently. I believe in this Wizards team. I was very happy with the way that the Wizards were able to put a draft together. And the last winner that I had on the night was the Trailblazers. The Portland Trailblazers, it's not that they had a huge number of draft picks, right? But they were able to go and get not only one of the guys that's the most NBA ready in the draft at number 7, a guy who could have gone number 1 in Donovan Clingan to help bolster that front court down low. But they also were able, we were just talking about the Wizards, and Danny Advia, is a great piece for the Blazers to have. They had to give up some picks for it, but being able to get Denny Avdia and Donovan Clingan in this draft for a team that is still young and is still growing. I think they did a phenomenal job there, sitting pat at 7, and they're a part of my winners club right there. Sadu Barry says the Wizards and the Knicks won the draft. I do really like what the Knicks did. I don't think they fall all the way in my winners territory, but what the Knicks were able to do, especially in that second round, where they had all those guys go. Tyler Kolek, Kevin McCullough Jr., Ariel Hukporti. Kevin McCullough Jr. is someone that I was kind of high on here at Kansas. Obviously, he helped lead that team to the championship just a year ago. But what the Knicks were able to do, again, with all these trades, all the trades that they were able to make, the second round they really cleaned up. Again, it wasn't like this incredible draft. I don't have them all the way up in my top of winners, but they had a solid draft and they did really good with the resources that were there for them to take. But anyway, let me know who you thought were the draft winners. In the next segment here, we're going to go over the draft losers. Once again, my draft winners were the Lakers, the Timberwolves, the Wizards, and the Blazers. Let me know what you think of that. I appreciate all of you guys for sticking around, talking some sports with me, but we will be right back with some NBA losers coming up next here on Sports by GSMC Podcast Network.
I wanna be the greatest. Everybody on the face shit. Look around and feel like everybody is a fake. If I make it, every day on the face shit. Hoping one day I blow up in the basement. Statement. The top is so vacant. I hear shit that I think is amazing. Waiting for my day when I'm playing. Sold out shows for 1,000 faces. Hey, give me that sound. Get in my way to be put down. Hitting your place, all kiss my sound. If I want that shit, then I'll get it right now. I'm losing it, the music fits. I'm losing shit. I'm stupid. If you choose to live, you choose to deep, you choose to fight, you lose your grip and lose your gift. Oh. Feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world there? Please, Lord, give me a sign. A sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world there?
Welcome back to Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Jeremy Lapidus. If you were just tuning in, we just went over NBA draft winners. I had 4 teams on that list that I had as the winners of this NBA draft. Those 4 teams were the Los Angeles Lakers, the Minnesota Timberwolves, the Washington Wizards, and the Portland Trail Blazers. In this segment here, we are going to finish up our NBA coverage for the day, talking about the NBA draft losers. Like I said, we just went over the winners. Now we're going to go over the losers here. And I've got 3 of those losers for you. We'll go over their draft and why I did not like what they did. But before we do that, remember that if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net. Leave a tip or donation with a message in it. That message should pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you do have a burning question about sports, anything at all that you would like to ask, go ahead and throw that in the chat. Throw it in the comments. I will get to it as soon as I possibly can. I appreciate all of you guys for sticking around, talking some sports with me here on a beautiful Friday afternoon. But like I was saying, we are going to get into the NBA losers here today. The losers I have are 3 teams from the draft. Like I said, we just finished going over the winners. Those winners were the Lakers, Timberwolves, Wizards, and Trailblazers. I have 3 losers for you here. And starting off with the number 1 overall pick, the Atlanta Hawks. Now, the Atlanta Hawks, I know a lot of people really like their draft, but I just don't really understand what they were doing with that first overall pick, right? They had the options to go and get, a guy like Donovan Clingan, a guy that might fit into their system better. Instead, they get Risa Shea, who, if they're able to develop him, and if they're able to develop them is the key word for 99.9% of the prospects in this entire draft, right? This is not a draft that says, hey, this is the one that is guaranteed to be a hit. There's almost no one in this draft that feels like that right now, right? But drafting Risa Shea there at 1 instead of either, trading back and then getting a guy like Klingon at 4. There were plenty of rumors of the Spurs trying to trade up to 1 and get Alex Sarr there, right? They could have gotten a guy that honestly would have helped them more, get a big guy down low for Trae Young to move the ball to. Not that Risa Shea will be a bust or anything, but I just don't love his game. He's not particularly great at anything. And to be the number 1 overall pick in the draft, I feel like you at least have to be elite in something. And he's good at just about everything, but he struggled with shooting. His defense isn't really awesome. He's not really that much of a passer, a playmaker, and he just leaves a lot to be desired when you're watching a guy like Risa Shea play, especially when you had the entire board ahead of you. Not just the board, but the option to trade back and get some assets. You get a first-round pick this year, a future first-rounder. They didn't make a lot of sense to me what they were doing there in that draft with the Hawks, and maybe in a little while there'll be egg on my face here, but Risa Shea just did not make any sense for me in round 1. At pick number in their second round, they get Nikola Drusius, excuse me, and he's a guy that I like. But, it's a second rounder and in a weak draft class. Again, potential. There's no one in that second round that I was wowed by, really. So it's just a disappointing draft for the Hawks. And I have them here on my losers list because of that. The next team that I have on my losers list is the Detroit Pistons. And the Detroit Pistons took, the first major what are you doing pick of the draft at number 5 overall. They drafted Ron Holland II. And in the second round, they get Bobby Klintman. And these 2 picks, well, again, potentially, if these guys can learn to shoot the ball, they could be really good. And in theory, I like Ron Holland, right? But if you look at the Pistons, you look at a team that was awful shooting the basketball last season, right? They didn't have any spacing because there was no one to shoot the basketball on the outside. And because they couldn't space the defense out, they weren't able to effectively dribble in, drive, and get an offense working, right? So in the first round, at pick number 5 overall, which is kind of insane that after the season they had the 5th overall pick anyway, but that's the NBA draft lottery. That's a whole nother conversation that we can get into another time. But the Pistons picking at 5 here, grab Ron Holland, who was legitimately getting number 1 overall pick buzz at the beginning of the season, but then when he plays in the G League Ignite, it's not working, right? His shooting is abysmal, right? And it's the same thing with Klintman. He only shot 36% from 3. And you have very similar situation to like last year when you draft Asar Thompson, a guy that's great defensively, has the physical tools and all the upside, but can't shoot. And now you've got 1, 2, 3, maybe 4 if you put Jaden Ivey in that conversation as well. 4 guys potentially starting for you that cannot shoot the basketball. They need to be able to develop a shot. And they brought in someone from the Pelicans who's been really good at developing shots. He's come in and developed the shots of CJ McCollum had his best shooting season. Lonzo Ball went up by 3%. There are plenty of guys that have come in and improved their shooting with the Pelicans. They bring him in, and if they're able to improve the shooting of these guys, they can flip the script on this draft. But as it stands right now, as I'm sitting here talking about this draft today, it's head-scratching, right? There were better options. Again, I keep going back to Klingon because he falls all the way to 7, and, the Blazers scoop him up, and he might be the most pro-ready prospect there. You had Klingon, who, if you're just looking for pure shooting, that's a guy right there that can help you space the floor and immediately help your team with one of its biggest weakness in connect. He falls all the way to 17. There's plenty of other guys that definitely would have fit a need, and there's plenty of needs for the Pistons, right? You don't have one of the worst records in the league without having a million different needs. But I just feel like they didn't fix any of their holes in this draft, and I was very disappointed by them. And I thought they could really do something to help out, but instead they they draft Ron Holland there. And again, if he's able to develop a shot, this is going to be a really good pick. But I'm not convinced that he can develop a shot in Detroit because they've had this same kind of, situation in Detroit for quite some time. But my last loser of the draft is the Milwaukee Bucks. And I know there's a lot of people that are high on AJ Johnson, but I cannot in good faith look at a guy who averaged 2.8 points per game in the Australian Basketball League and say, good job, Milwaukee. You got it. He's a project pick. He's a guy that needs to develop, needs a couple years, is not going to be ready right away, right? In AJ Johnson. And this is a team that has a championship level core right now. They shore up the defense. This team competes for a championship. You have Giannis, you have Dame. You just need to get defenders that are able to come in. And instead, in the first round, you draft AJ Johnson, who isn't particularly great on defense, who isn't particularly great. I know his situation down there in Australia doesn't show everything off, and he's got some of those intangible assets intangible skills and the measurements on him that, again, potential. That is the big word of the draft this year. But the Bucks don't need potential. What the Bucks needed was a guy that could come in and help develop a strong core, a strong bench unit, get some depth going around Giannis, around Dame. And even in the second round, Tyler Smith, he'll be fine. He'll do a good job offensively, but their biggest weakness was defense. They were scoring with the best of them in the regular season when they were healthy. When they had a healthy roster and they were able to keep everybody together, that offense was going the way that it wanted to. The defense was one of the worst in the league, and that is what ended up killing them. The Pacers, who kind of built like them, had a slightly better defense, a slightly worse offense, were able to handle them. Now, I know a lot of that is because Giannis was hurt, but you can't seriously look at this team and say, you know what we need? We need more depth scoring. That cannot seriously be your number one concern if you are the Milwaukee Bucks, and I just don't understand what they're doing. I understand they're flirting with that second apron, right? I understand they want to stay under it. But getting a strong defensive-minded player in the draft is something that could have easily helped them, make a big step this season. And instead, they just kind of tread water, do the same thing, get more bench scoring. That if you outscore your opponent, you win a game, right? But if you keep making it harder on yourself, if you keep making it harder on yourself to stop the opponent, you're going to make it harder on yourself to outscore them. And I don't agree with the strategy that the Bucks with the strategy the Bucks are currently employing. But those are my losers for this NBA draft: the Hawks, the Pistons, and the Bucks. This NBA draft is really hard to analyze, right? Because a lot of them had, again, a lot of these are potential picks. A lot of these are looking at tools saying, hey, I've got a feeling this is the one that's going to work out. And I do understand the vision in a lot of these picks, but if you're looking at the team right now and where they're sitting in their championship window, a lot of these picks just don't make a lot of sense to me. Once again, my NBA winners were the Lakers, the Timberwolves, the Wizards, and the Trailblazers, and my losers were the Hawks, the Pistons, and the Bucks. Let me know if you have any thoughts on any team's draft philosophy, any team's draft that you particularly liked or hated. In our next segment, we are going to move into the world of football, talk a little bit about the New York Giants. We have been doing a preview and review of the offseason and the schedule for every team in the NFL. We are finishing up our first division, the NFC East. So we'll go over the Giants offseason, give them a letter grade, and then we will go over the schedule game by game and talk about what we expect out of the New York Giants in a crucial year to see if they stay the course or blow it up. So stick around for that. We'll be right back here on Sports by GSMC Podcast Network.
Looking for your daily fix of sports talk without having to pay for it? GSMC Sports Network is available on YouTube. Just search GSMC Sports Network. Get your fix of daily sports talk shows on YouTube, absolutely free. NFL, college football, NBA, MLB, MMA, UFC, fantasy football, and so much more. GSMC Sports Network has shows running all day long, with new sports shows starting every 2 hours. Just like on your favorite cable sports channel, except GSMC Sports Network is absolutely free. Just search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube to catch one of your new favorite shows, like the GSMC College Football Podcast, Chip Shot Football Podcast, Hoops and Heels Women's Sports Podcast, GSMC Basketball Podcast, and so many more. Check it out for yourself. GSMC Sports Network, now available on YouTube absolutely free. Search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube.
Welcome back to Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Jeremy Lapidus. If you are just tuning in, we've just finished our coverage of the NBA draft for the day. We went over winners and losers. Once again, my winners were the Los Angeles Lakers, the Minnesota Timberwolves, the Washington Wizards, and the Portland Trail Blazers. And my losers were the Atlanta Hawks, the Detroit Pistons, and the Milwaukee Bucks. In this segment, though, we are going to move out of the world of the NBA, talk a little bit about the NFL. If you've been watching this show the last couple days, you'll know we started a series, a segment going over the offseason of every NFL team and going over the schedule of every NFL team. We have done 3 of the 4 teams in the NFC East so far. In this segment, in these next 2 segments, we'll be finishing up the NFC East, talking about my New York Giants, talk about their offseason, what I expect their record to be this season, going game by game in the schedule. But before we get into their offseason, remember that if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net. Leave a tip or donation with a message in it. That message should pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you do have a burning question about sports, anything at all that you would like to add, go and throw that in the comments. Go ahead and throw it in the chat. I will get to it as soon as I possibly can. I appreciate all of you guys for sticking around, talking some sports with me here on a beautiful Friday afternoon. But like I was saying, we are going to get into some NFL coverage here, taking a look at the New York Giants. NFL offseason review, the New York Giants. And if we're taking a look at their offseason, step number 1 is the loss of Saquon Barkley, right? The heart and soul of that team, the entire offense, they let walk out of the building. And more than the additions for the Giants this offseason are the subtractions, right? Obviously, we have Saquon Barkley. He walks to go play for the division rival Eagles in a move that definitely very much improved the Eagles and hurts the Giants. They bring in Devin Singletary to replace him. Devin Singletary, who is coming off a career season in Houston after taking over the premier back role a little more than a quarter way through the season from Dameon Pierce. He finishes with 897 yards. Again, that is a career high for him. So he's coming off a career year. The Giants don't invest in that running back position. They let a guy in Saquon Barkley walk, who I think might be the second best running back in the NFL right now. And that hurts, to be honest with you. Now the Giants need to find another way to have that threat on offense, to get this offense running. What the Giants like to run was a play action, and that works really well when you have the threat of a Saquon Barkley coming at you. But when you replace Saquon Barkley with, Devin Singletary, I'm not too convinced that it's going to work the same way. Not that it worked too well with the injuries that they sustained last season, but you go back to the year where they won a playoff game just 2 years ago now. Uh, it's we're not sure if that's going to work. But outside of Saquon Barkley, they also lost a couple of other key pieces. Most importantly, probably being safety Xavier McKinney. Xavier McKinney is a guy who is really underrated. He signs a huge deal to go with the Packers. I believe it's 4 years, $67 million. He joins the Packers in a secondary that now is stacked over there, but it leaves the Giants really weak in that unit. And they go and they draft Tyler Nubin in the second round to try and replace him. But what Xavier McKinney is able to do, I don't know if Nubin is going to be able to replace that ball hawk and tackling ability. He's one of those Swiss Army knives at safety. And the Giants like to do this. Back when Landon Collins was at the top of his game, they let him walk, bring in Xavier McKinney, and it worked, right? Now they're doing the same thing with Xavier McKinney, letting him walk, bringing in Tyler Nubin, and I'm less convinced that this one will work. But they let a lot of guys walk. That defense is going to get better with injuries coming back. The offensive line is going to get better again. Injuries coming back. But we look at some of their additions, some of the big additions, and this is on the defensive side. Brian Burns, they get in a trade from Carolina. They send a 2025 fifth and a second round pick, so they don't really have to give up too much for Brian Burns, who is arguably a top 10 pass rusher in the league right now. Putting him on the other side of Kayvon Thibodeau, who continues to, get better in the NFL. He has his moments. There are times where he struggles, but he definitely has his moments in the NFL. Dexter Lawrence, one of the top defensive tackles in the entire game up the middle. And then they also signed Jordan Phillips from the Bills, who's also a big run stuffer in the middle. If you want to run that 4-down set, that's a nasty defensive line to have at the bottom. And even if you want to run a three down set, it's a nasty combination down there. So I really like what they've done defensively. Now, they did lose defensive coordinator Wink Martindale, so I'm not sure exactly which defensive style they are going to run now this season. That's something that we have to keep an eye on. But bringing in Brian Burns is a huge pick for them. They also obviously bring in Malik Neighbors, their wide receiver, their number one wide receiver, a guy that they draft at the 6th overall pick. They also bring in Isaiah McKenzie. So now they got a very speedy wide receiver core. They have him. They've got McKenzie. They have they continue to work on this short game, right? They're, from what I can tell, with Daniel Jones, and that's going to be the big question: is Daniel Jones the guy? Because the way that their offense is set up and the way that his contract is set up is the fact that they have an out after this season. They bring in Drew Lock, and it's going to be a true quarterback competition. Daniel Jones is coming back from a torn ACL, so we'll see how he's able to come back, as running is a huge part of his game. But I think this Giants team made some improvements in the offseason, especially on the defensive side. The offense is going to struggle, and I think overall they kind of stayed pretty much in the same spot. It's hard to improve that much when you have that many holes to fill, but if they can stay healthy, especially on the offensive line, I think the Giants can surprise some people. And we'll go over their schedule game by game here in just a second. It is a tougher schedule for them. It's a lot of matchups that they honestly don't really match up too well in. So we'll go over the Giants' schedule in just a second. That's coming up in our next segment. But I am going to give the Giants a C. Solid C for the offseason. They made huge additions on the defense. They had huge subtractions on the offense. And overall, it was just kind of an average offseason. There was nothing to be there was stuff to be super excited about, and there was stuff to be super bummed about, and all kind of averaged out. You can make an argument maybe I should give them a C- here because they lose a guy who's a big part of the mentality of that team, and Saquon Barkley as well. but let me put a little bit of a positive spin on it as a Giants fan. I'm going to give them just a C here. But let me know what you think of the Giants offseason. I know it was not very good, to put it lightly. There were stuff that they could have improved on that they kind of just let slip through their fingers. They let a lot of their guys walk, but this is an important year for the Giants. This will determine whether or not they're going to ride with Daniel Jones or not into the future. So I'll let you know what I think their record's going to be. That's coming up next. We'll go game by game in their schedule. I'll talk about every game, break it down for you. So stick around for that. We'll be right back talking more football here on Sports by GSMC Podcast Network.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found.
Welcome back to Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Jeremy Lapidus. If you are just tuning in, we just finished talking all about the Giants offseason. We went over all of their additions, their subtractions, their draft. I went and give them a C. They lost a lot of key pieces, but they got some huge additions back. So it all kind of balances out in the end. Before that, we were talking about the NBA draft. We went over winners, we went over losers. I had the winners of the NBA draft as the Los Angeles Lakers, the Minnesota Timberwolves, the Washington Wizards, and the Portland Trailblazers, and my losers were the Hawks, the Pistons, and the Bucks. But in this segment, we're going to finish up our NFL coverage. We're going to go over the Giants' schedule game by game, finishing up the NFC East as we went through the other three teams in the last couple days. So if you want to hear about their records, go check it out. And we'll do a whole division recap at the very end as well. But before we get into that, remember that if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net. Leave a tip or donation with a message in it. That message should pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you do have a burning question about sports, anything at all that you would like to ask, go and throw that in the comments. Go and throw that in the chat. I will get to it as soon as I possibly can. I appreciate all of you guys for sticking around, talking some sports with me here on a beautiful Friday afternoon. But like I was saying, we are going to finish up our NFL coverage today, going over the Giants' schedule game by game. So if you're new to this segment, like I said, I've got a big old spreadsheet. I'll post the NFC East tonight, actually, so go ahead and check that out. But Game 1, Giants versus Vikings. And this is going to be a really interesting game, right? The Vikings most likely starting Sam Darnold. They have a much better offense than the Giants do. Their defense has a lot of rookies. It's still in shambles. They have a lot of moving pieces in that offense. I am going to take the Giants to win this one, although I do see that this one could go either way, quite honestly. The Vikings have a tough schedule after this, and I feel like this is one that they feel like they might have to win. But I'm going to take the Giants to start off the season 1-0 against the Vikings before, taking a couple tough ones. At Commanders, this is the first game at home for Jaden Daniels. I think that's going to be enough juice for the Commanders to take this one against the Giants, as the Giants fall to 1-1 after week 2. And it doesn't get any easier. Their next two games are against two potential playoff teams in the Browns and the Cowboys. They go to Cleveland to play against the Browns, and again, going up against Myles Garrett. That offensive line, as much as it's going to be improved this season, because they're getting Andrew Thomas back fully healthy, Myles Garrett is going to destroy that offensive line. And they're not going to give Daniel Jones or Drew Lock, whichever one of those guys is back there at that point, any time to breathe or really make a difference. So I have the Browns taking that game 3 against the Giants. And also back home against the Cowboys, Cowboys have been a thorn in the Giants' side for a very long time. So I'm taking the Cowboys to win that game as well. So after 4 weeks, the Giants fall to 1-3. Last in the division, not a place that you want to be. And it's not like this schedule gets any easier. Like I was saying, this is a tough schedule for the New York Giants this season. They fly all the way across the country to take on the Seahawks, a Seahawks team that I'm I'm pretty high on. Again, I have this one going either way. This is another one of those 50-50 games, but I'm going to give the Giants a win on this one. The Giants and the Seahawks play pretty closely. Even in the game where the Giants got blown out last season, there were moments where it looked like the Giants were staying in it in that one. So at this point, the Giants could be 0-5. They could be 2-3, which is where I have them. I'm giving them a little bit of the benefit of the doubt here. But again, it doesn't get any easier. They immediately, week 6, 7, and 8, go back home. It's a little bit of a homestand, but they have the Bengals and the Eagles, and then on the road at the Steelers. And I think the Giants are going to lose all 3 of those games. The Bengals, that's not really a close one. The Eagles, again, have had the Giants number for the last 5 years, basically. And the Steelers, that defense of the Steelers, especially playing against the AFC North, as I've talked about a lot in this NFC East division review, it's going to be tough for these teams, especially the Giants and the Commanders. Those defenses are stout, and these teams don't have really the offense to deal with that. So the Steelers, I have taking this game as the Giants, after week 8, fall to 2-6. Not really the spot you want to be basically halfway through the season. They do turn it around in the next 2 games, or I have them turning it around the next 2 games after the bye. Before the bye, excuse me. They take on the Commanders week 9 and the Panthers week 10. I have them getting 2 wins back as they head into the bye week with a record of 4-6. So not the worst, not awful. They have a shot at the playoffs, but again, their schedule down the stretch, the Bucs, the Cowboys, the Saints, the Ravens, the Falcons, the Colts, and the Eagles. There's not really a stretch in this schedule where you look at it and say, hey, I think the Giants might be able to rip a couple off in a row here. And it doesn't get any easier coming right off the bye. Like I said, the Buccaneers, the Giants at this point are 4-6, week 12 at home against the Bucs. I think the Bucs take this game. As much as I think the Bucs overperformed last season, I do think Baker Mayfield is able to produce a winning team, a team that's better than this Giants. And the same thing with the Cowboys in Dallas. I believe that's a Thanksgiving game. They're gonna look pretty bad. They got destroyed in both games against the Cowboys last season, and I don't really see the improvement for there to be too much of a difference this season. They'll get one more back against the Saints. The Saints are kind of middling as well, but I have the Giants taking that one before coming back down to earth in a game against the Ravens. Probably going to get killed in that one as well. So 3 games left to go as we head into week 16. I have the Giants currently sitting at 5-9, basically probably eliminated from playoff contention at that point. Week 16 against the Falcons, I do have them getting one more win. Again, this one could go either way. I'm not sure exactly how Kirk Cousins is going to respond, but the Giants, I think, could get another win and probably will get another win in the next 3, either against the Falcons, Colts, or Eagles, and I'm giving it to them against the Falcons. Then they get the Colts and the Eagles, losing to the Colts to fall to 6-10 before a Week 18 game against the Eagles, and I do have it set up to a point where this is a must-win game for the Eagles to get into the playoffs, or at least guarantee a division title, so I have the Eagles, trying in Week 18. They're going to win that game, and the Giants' final record is going to be 6-11 this year. That's the exact same record that they had last season as they headed into yet another disappointment year. So again, the offseason, not too much improvement. Pretty much the same result. This probably spells the end of the Daniel Jones era in New York. They are going to have another high draft pick this year, and it's going to be most likely a new quarterback. Anything can happen, but this feels like the end of the road for him. This is his do or die season. We have gone through the entirety of the NFC East, so we'll go over records. In fourth place, I have the Giants at 6-11, and in third, I have the Commanders at 7-10. And I have the Cowboys coming in second at 10-7, and the Eagles winning the division at 11-6. This is going to be a tough division. None of these guys have a particularly easy schedule. The Giants, I think, might have the hardest schedule out of all of them. Having to go up against the AFC North is not an easy task. That might be the best division in all of football. But I do think that the Eagles will be able to respond, take this division, continue the trend of no team repeating in the NFC East for the since 2003, 2004, when the Eagles did it 20 years ago. But anyway, let me know what you think the Giants might do this season. Like I said, I have them at 6 wins. That's honestly generous. I think they could have anywhere from 2 to 6 wins. I kind of gave them the benefit of the doubt in about 3 or 4 of the matchups there, because I did not want to write a 2 next to them. But anyway, let me know what you guys think in the comments. That's the Giants. That's the NFC East. We'll pick a new division next week, break down all of their games, their entire offseason, and much more. But we're going to finish off our show today here going over our MLB power rankings. It is Friday. It's been a week. We'll go over our power rankings. We had some switch-ups at the top, at the bottom, in the middle. So stick around for that. We'll get all into that in just a second here on Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. Welcome back to Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Jeremy Lapidus. If you are just tuning in, we just finished going over the Giants offseason, the Giants schedule. I had the Giants finishing at 6-11, but really they could be anywhere from 2-15 to 6-11 with their schedule. We also talked about their offseason. I gave them a C for what they did in the offseason. They lost Saquon Barkley, but they were able to gain a lot on the defensive end, which kind of balances it out there. Before that, we talked all about the NBA draft. We had winners, we had losers. My winners for the NBA draft were the Lakers, the Timberwolves, the Wizards, and the Blazers, and my losers were the Hawks, the Pistons, and the Bucks. But in this segment, we are going to finish off our show today talking about the MLB power rankings. It is Friday. We do have to do our MLB power rankings, so I've cooked up a brand new one for you. But before we get into that, remember that if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net. Leave a tip or donation with a message in it. That message should pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you do have a burning question about sports, anything at all that you would like to ask, go and throw that in the comments. Go ahead and throw that in the chat. I will get to it as soon as I possibly can. I appreciate all of you guys for sticking around, talking some sports with me here on a beautiful Friday afternoon. But like I was saying, we are going to finish off our show here today with some MLB power rankings. It's been a week. We have our brand new power rankings up here for you. And why not just start off at the bottom, right? At number 30 for you, I've got same team, the worst team in baseball, the Chicago White Sox. The Chicago White Sox continue to be awful. They continue to not show any signs of improvement, and I'm curious to see how much worse they get after the deadline when they inevitably sell Robert or anybody else that they have on that roster that is worth anything. 29, I have the Marlins. Thought about moving them up against the Rockies, but we're going to keep the Marlins there at 29. They've been tied with the Rockies. They've been climbing a little bit. The Rockies have been falling a little bit, but both of these teams are equally awful. At 27, I've got the A's, and at 26, I have the Angels. Those are pretty much the consensus bottom 5 teams in the MLB. Don't really have an issue with any order you have down there as long as the White Sox are at the bottom, but those are the bottom 5 teams in the league: Angels, Athletics, Rockies, Marlins, White Sox. Then we get into that next tier. This is going to be the tier from 25, the Tigers, the Blue Jays, and the Cubs, kind of in their own tier here. The Tigers continue to fall after a strong start to the season. They haven't really made a lot of ground up since then. The Blue Jays probably going to sell this trade deadline. I'm curious to see if they go full sell, selling a guy like Vladdy and Bo Bichette, or if they try and do a half sell and reload for next season. I think they should just blow it all up, but they're sitting here at 24. At 23, the Cubs just continue to show me nothing. They went on a little bit of a run there just earlier this week, but they're back down to where the Cubs have been since the first month of the season, and they continue to fall. They've just been awful. Injuries have hit them hard. They get some of those guys back, but it hasn't really been the same. At 23, I have the 22, excuse me, I have the Nationals. They dropped one spot. They were in a playoff spot for a while, but after getting swept by the Padres there, they drop a spot. The Padres and the Nationals have a little bit of a rivalry going, don't they? The Nats just announced today that they're calling up James Wood, one of the top 5 prospects in all of baseball, a little earlier than I was expecting. I thought they'd wait until August, but I'm very excited to see what James Wood can do at the MLB level. At 21, I have the Pirates. Pirates might be onto something. Paul Skeens is awesome. Mitch Keller is awesome. Their pitching staff is great. If they can get some bats, I've seen a lot of people floating the idea that they trade for someone like Luis Robert from the White Sox. And if they can get some bats going, I think they could make a serious push for a wild card spot this season in the MLB. And I have them at 21. The Rays at 20, I was ready to call them dead, but you should never call the Rays dead, because the Rays will always come back for you, and they will always find a way to get back into that playoff picture. They're 7-3 over their last 10, and they're dangerously close to getting that wild card spot. They're only 4 games back of Kansas City, who has been sliding a little bit, and they're separating themselves from that bottom group. There's about 3 teams outside the wild card in the AL that are competing for it, and the Rays are getting to the right side of that group. So they continue to climb. They're up 5 spots. I believe they're the biggest climbers of the week. They're the biggest climbers of the week, up to 25. I have the Reds at 19. They're going to get healthy. I'm curious what they do at the deadline, because they called everybody up last season. They're young. They're going to continue to develop, and I think they're better than they are, but they just have not been performing. Same thing with the Giants, although the Giants are probably on the opposite side of the spectrum as the Reds. They're an older core that's trying to stay relevant. The Reds are a younger core that's trying to develop. I have the Giants at 18 and the Reds at 19. At 17, I've got the Texas Rangers, the reigning champs. They get Max Scherzer back, but it still hasn't really been enough to turn it around. Again, I believe in this team to get better. But as it stands right now, they haven't shown me anything other than, they won the World Series last year. And I kind of want to believe in them more than they've been showing me. At 16, I have the Mets. The Mets have been one of the hottest teams in baseball. They are currently one game back from the wild card, sitting at 500. They were 11 games below 500 not too long ago, but they continue to go on a run. They're all the way up to 16. Again, I was ready to count this team out, but maybe they're not selling at the deadline anymore. Maybe they buy. They've still got about a month until the deadline, but it's an interesting question with the Mets. Same thing with the Diamondbacks. They're getting healthy. They're getting their pitching back. The hitting is starting to go again. Corbin Carroll has been back, and they're going to climb up one spot to 15. The Cardinals stay pat at 14. They've been kind of treading water since they had their big explosive jump about a month ago. They are in that wild card race. They currently hold that third wild card spot in the NL, the one that is so highly coveted by almost every team there. But it is going to be a battle, a brutal battle there. And the Cardinals need to get some of their veterans hitting if they want to stay atop. The Royals started off hot and they got hurt. Their pitching kind of went downhill just a little bit, and they're starting to decline for it. I have them down 3 spots to 13, falling below the Astros, who move up 1 spot, continuously climbing. They had that awful start to the season. Their pitching is starting to get healthy, and that is a scary thing to think for a team that bats weren't working, pitching wasn't working. They've climbed their way all the way back to 500 now. Only 3.5 games out of a wild card spot. Only 7 games. Only 4.5 games out of the division lead with the Mariners, who are falling 5 spots. They're the biggest fallers of the week here, as they fall all the way from 5 to 11. I think 5 was a little too high, but their pitching is great. The bats have really struggled, and if they can get a bat at the deadline, this is a team that can make a run. But I need to see Julio Rodriguez get something going. I need to see a little more out of that offense. And number 10, the Red Sox. I said they'd be mid forever, but they've proved me wrong. Again, they're on a roll. They are currently 8-2 in their last 10, and don't look now, but they're starting to challenge for a playoff spot. Half a game out there. The Red Sox, I don't think this pace is sustainable, honestly. I think they'll fall back down at some point, but for now, they're in my top 10. Same thing with the Padres. The Padres, after sweeping the Nats in a chippy series, tough one. Jurickson Profar has showed up and showed out. He was a huge part of that series victory. They continue to get better after an abysmal start to the year for them. The Braves stand pat. The Braves, they've been doing their thing. They've been getting better, but they're just kind of treading water right now as that best team in the NL that isn't a division leader. Excuse me. And then we get to the Brewers here at 7. And the Brewers are an enigma to me. I don't feel like they're this good. I really don't. There's nothing about this team that screams this good, but the Brewers are consistently winning ball games, so I can't move them out of that 7 spot. The Twins, on the other hand, the Twins have moved ahead of the Royals in that division. They started to get healthy. Pablo Lopez, I know, has been disappointing, but the underlying numbers are there for him. He'll get better. I truly do believe that. So I have them moving up 3 spots to 6. At 5, I have the Guardians. Once again, that AL Central is a lot better than we all expected. The Guardians, Stephen Kwan is hitting. Their pitching, their bullpen is elite, and their offense has started to come to play. They've hit 50 wins. They're just the 5th team in Major League Baseball to hit that number. All 5 of those teams firmly at the top of our list. But we did have some changes near the top. The Phillies, they drop a spot after Schwarber and Harper go down with injuries. They're both on the IL as of today. And the Yankees, their pitching, they get Garrett Cole back, but their pitching has gone down the drain. Their hitting is still there, and they're still a great team. but the Dodgers move ahead. But to both of those teams, they move up to number 2. This is the highest that I have had them in my power rankings all season, I believe. They move up 2 spots to number 2. Shohei Ohtani just continues to hit the crap out of the baseball, right? It's not fair to it's not fun to be a baseball right now when you're in LA and you're at a Dodgers game. Shohei Ohtani is incredible. He's probably going to win MVP despite not fielding. He has a huge I think he has the biggest WAR in all of the NL despite being a DH all season long. And at number 1, I have the Orioles. I know they're still trailing in the division to the Yankees, but they've been playing much better than the Yankees as of late. They beat them in a series recently. Gunnar Henderson is an MVP candidate. And, if you go by win percentage, they're actually in first place in that division. So this is a team with 119 plus 119 run differential. That's second in the league only to the Los Angeles Dodgers and tied with the Phillies. This Yankees team, just the way that this Orioles team is just great at everything. They've got great bats all up and down the lineup. The all-star selection for them is going to be, they're going to have a lot of all-stars in there, and I'm very excited to see this MVP race go down between Bobby Witt Jr. of the Royals and Gunnar Henderson of the Orioles. It's going to be a lot of fun to see. But the Orioles remain at number 1. The Dodgers move up to number 2, and we've got a little bit of shakeup here in our top 4, although these top 4 kind of have been the same basically the entire season. But anyway, let me know what you think of the MLB Power Rankings. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. But I hope everybody has a great weekend. I hope you all go enjoy yourselves right before July 4th. Happy July. I will be back on Monday, same time, same place, going over all of the major stories from around the world of sports. I will see you then. I've been your host, Jeremy Lapidus. You've been listening to Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. Have a great weekend. I will see you on Monday. Bye-bye.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day. I'm tired of shit and the